both.
Sarah Sultana.
Deputy Speaker. 2 days ago, the United States carried out an illegal and unprovoked military attack on Venezuela, killing at least 40 people. During that attack, the Venezuelan president and his wife were abducted from their home and taken to the US on bogus drug-related charges. This Labour government is now refusing to assess whether this is legal. So I ask the Secretary of State this. If a foreign power accused the British Prime Minister of breaking its domestic law, bombed targets in the UK, killed dozens of British citizens and abducted the Prime Minister and his wife in the middle of the night, would the government be able to say that was legal? Or is international law only something that applies when Donald Trump says it can? And in that case, is the Prime Minister and this Labour government anything more than Donald Trump's poodle?
So I think the honourable member seems to be making an equivalence between the Maduro regime and the democratically elected UK Prime Minister. I just think that this equivalence thing is just really inappropriate, and we should recognise both the huge damage that the Maduro regime has done, and including the fact that it is under investigation by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity.
Just to give an update on my previous announcement that this statement will now run its course because the backbench business debate has been postponed for a future date. Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Maduro government had no democratic legitimacy, but a return to gunboat diplomacy and strongman-led spheres of influence is not in our national interest. The rules-based international order is not teetering, but it is collapsing. This is disastrous, but we cannot just bemoan it. We must respond to this threat by building up the coherence of our own bloc, which is Europe. Does the Foreign Secretary agree that these developments demonstrate that the absolute priority must be not on noises off, but on deepening our connections, hard and soft, with our own continent?
Well, I think we should strengthen our European partnerships. That's what we have been doing. We should also strengthen our own investment in defence. Again, that is what we are doing. But I also think that the transatlantic partnership remains important. It is what we will be discussing this week with the Americans as part of discussing the security guarantees for Ukraine. Those security guarantees that we have been discussing involving the US are also about the security of Europe, the security of Ukraine, security of the UK, and ultimately the upholding of international law.
Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Foreign Secretary agree that failing to call out your allies publicly when they violate international law, alongside one's enemies, which is easy, weakens adherence for international law fundamentally? And therefore, will she denounce in this chamber the US's illegal actions in Venezuela and the snatching of its President, however vile? And will she confirm that if it comes to a vote at the UN Security Council, that the UK will stand up for international law and will not abstain?
Well, the UK continues to argue for international law, to ensure that international law guides and frames the decisions that we take as part of our foreign policy, and I have directly raised the issues of international law, particularly around Venezuela, with the US Secretary of State, and we continue to do so. Upholding international law also means upholding some of the alliances that sustain that international law, and that is what we will continue to do.
Rachel Maskell.
Deputy Speaker, in order to hold up international law, it's important that there's robust accountability on two fronts. Firstly, on how we use the intelligence that we have as a country ahead of actions being taken. I wonder if the Foreign Secretary can say how she used the UK intelligence before this operation, but also the accountability after an event, and how we will call the US President to account in the light that he is a sitting member of the UN Security Council.
Well, the UN Security Council has obviously been discussing Venezuela today. That is what the UN Security Council would expect the UN Security Council to do on a significant issue. We have obviously, she will know, a deep intelligence cooperation, security cooperation with Five Eyes countries. On this particular operation, we were not involved and also not informed in advance, and nor were other countries.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The US has abducted the leader of Venezuela, yet the government can't say whether it's legal or illegal. Let's try an easier one, Madam Deputy Speaker. If the US were to abduct the Premier of Greenland, would that be illegal or illegal?
Again, I would say to the honourable member, there's a continual sort of searching for equivalence when it is really inappropriate to do so. We have I've made very clear our position on Greenland. The future of Greenland is for Greenlanders and for the Danes, not for other countries, be that the US or any other country around the world.
Tom Hayes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, like the Foreign Secretary, we want an end to this brutal regime. I hope now that Venezuela can move to a democracy with full control of its oil and resources following this breach of the UN Charter. The Leader of the Opposition says that we live, and I quote her, in a fundamentally different world, in an increasingly dangerous world. After all, no UK Prime Minister previously has had to stand up so fulsomely for Greenland and Denmark's security. So when the facts change, should our stance not change too? Should we not be working more closely with the European Union and EU member states to deepen our security and our economic ties? But do we not also need the European Union to be more flexible and pragmatic about what it constitutes as alignment with the UK?
Well, we are strengthening our security cooperation with European allies. We had increasing security partnerships, discussions, both with groups of other European countries, also with the EU as a whole, and also with the NATO members in Europe too. So that has been crucial. It's a central part of the coalition of the willing, and I think that those partnerships need to continue to deepen.
Shockout Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Minister justifies in her statement a flagrant breach of international law by citing that Venezuela's drop in GDP, narcotics trafficking and gold trading. I mean, these are issues that could affect countless countries around the world, but let me remind the Secretary of State, in the words of the person who perpetrated this action, Donald J. Trump, of why he committed this action. The US is going to have a presence in Venezuela as it pertains to oil. We are going to take out tremendous amount of wealth from the ground. We are going to run Venezuela. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary to take a leaf out of Donald Trump's book and answer a question once? Does the government support US colonial expansionism, or does the government believe in the rules-based world order? Which is it? It can't be both.
Yeah. Well, the government supports democracy for Venezuela. The people of Venezuela have been denied that democracy for far too long. We should support that democracy. We should support the international law and a rules-based order, and make sure that a future government of Venezuela reflects the will of the people and respects the human rights of the Venezuelan people.
Marcus Campbell-Sabers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I ask the Minister if she's reflected on the well-documented difficulties that arise when the US assumes administrative control of occupied territory, difficulties we saw all too clear during the Iraq conflict? And given these lessons, will the government press our American allies to ensure we see an early, credible election, one that enfranchises the estimated 7 million Venezuelans who emigrated during Maduro's time in office? Wouldn't this offer the most legitimate route back to democracy and spare the US the burden and risk inherent in attempting to administer another state? And doesn't this whole situation to displace autocracy demonstrate a need to establish a new consensus that updates the principles that govern the intervention in failed states?
I think the Honourable Member makes a sort of important, thoughtful point about the way in which frameworks need to work. But he is right that this needs to be the transition to democracy at the earliest opportunity. The first stages in that are ensuring there is stability, and then the release of the political prisoners, the return of political opposition members so that they can come back to Venezuela, because you cannot fight a free and fair election whilst there is still political repression in place.
Christine Jodin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say this is one of the most depressing days I've spent in this chamber in the past few years, because while I welcome the Foreign Secretary's commitment to democracy in Venezuela and her repeated commitment to the rules-based international system and our alliances, I cannot bring that together with this government's abject failure to condemn the actions of Donald Trump in breaking international law. And the concern it has created, reflected in statements by the leaders of Greenland, Denmark, Sweden, the Foreign Secretary herself at the dispatch box. So how is the government going to reconcile that blatant contradiction?
Well, I think set out already our clear position on Greenland, the importance of international law, but also the importance of working through our different alliances and being prepared to raise issues, be it around international law or other issues, both privately and publicly as well. And what we need to do is to ensure we can pursue the UK interests and also our values. And we do that through the discussions that will be taking place this week on Ukraine, and we do this through the pursuit of democracy and our values in Venezuela as well.
James Naish.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was reading this morning that a former Under Secretary of Defence for Readiness in the US said that he is not aware of, and I quote, any plans for how the next few days will actually be managed by the US. So can I ask the Foreign Secretary what specific reassurances she has received from US counterparts that that isn't the case, that there is a plan in place, and the work that we're doing with our international partners, particularly from NATO, to make sure that support is provided?
Well, one of the reasons that I spoke to the US Secretary Rubio yesterday was in order to be able to engage on what the plans now should be going forward. I think there obviously, given the level of criminal gang operations in Venezuela, given the different factions that there have been in Venezuela, preventing greater instability right now, making sure we can get that stable basis and a plan for democracy is immensely important. There is a very strong civil society, opposition groups and so on, but they need to be enabled and supported in order to make sure that we can get that peaceful, democratic transition. It will be crucially important.
Jim Allister.
Most members of this